Willbenders protect the Canthan throne with unflinching loyalty. They have no time to play at war. If a threat emerges, they'll strike it down before it has time to react. They take the fight to their targets, using rapid movement skills to navigate the battlefield. A Willbender's blade work is unmatched, and wielding a sword in their offhand gives them extra opportunities for ruthless cuts.
You can go.
Yeah, so Willbender, super zoomy, fast Guardian. We saw a little bit on the featurette, a lot of mobility. We'll be really diving into that, but really pushing that more assassin-y, roamer, kind of skirmisher playstyle. I mean, we've seen the similar silhouette with like Sword Revenant, heavy armor, with that similar high mobility playstyle. Warrior maybe a little bit slower with their offhand sword. But Guardian is really going to be pushing again toward that more melee brawler, kind of glassier again, high mobility, a little bit disconnected from the usual deliberate, slow movements that we see with the Guardian profession. And for all of the spreadsheeters out there, this character has 2,189 power, so all three of them are different. That's just how the default loadouts turned out. I'm going to go complain about that to somebody after this. But keep that in mind when we're running through skill facts. But first, before we get into the sword, let's talk about the profession mechanic a little bit. So we're going to see something pretty different from the kind of typical virtues that Guardian has. We're very used to these passives that are just always there, and then you're going to activate the virtue and it's going to have like a singular upfront effect. But the Willbender virtues are quite different. There's actually no passive attached to these. There's only going to be kind of this active stance. I don't really want to call it a stance because we have a stance skill type and these are not stance skill types, but it's more of that style of play where you kind of enter justice stance and then your outgoing strikes are going to apply burning. So if I'm just hitting this guy, hitting these guys, see no burning procs, but once I hop into justice here, we're going to then start accumulating the more understood justice gameplay. And we saw a little bit there on the ground. This is going to be something that we see across all of the different different virtues here. They all kind of have their own flavor of what we're calling Willbender flames. So here we have the kind of the triple claw on the ground. This is actually target controlled, so it can only hit one target even if you're standing on all three. The intent of the Willbender flames is less about damage and more about giving you additional strikes, because we're going to see similar mechanical behavior on both resolve and courage. That's a little bit different from what we're used to, but we're going to see that these Willbender flames really serve to provide a little bit more value to that style of gameplay. So we saw the claw with justice, resolve, we're going to have the little straight line, and courage, we'll come back to these skills again. We have the nice circular AoE radius. So a few different flavors of Willbender flames, just to really push a little bit of those extra strikes. And as we were talking about, this character is super fast, high mobility. All of these, all the virtues are mobility skills. So we see a pretty decent range on justice, resolve in there, decent dash. This one's also an evade. And yeah, we can just talk about courage real quick. Courage is actually shadow step, pretty long range. Initial hit, it's again pretty low damage on these strikes. They're more just intended to push the virtue triggers. So the actual trigger that we're going to see for resolve is that instead of having that initial upfront heal that we see on like core resolve and wings of resolve, is that it's going to have the similar justice mechanic of every 5 strikes is going to heal you a little bit. So we'll just lose some health here real quick and be in combat so that matters. So see that while we're in justice, we're getting this, or in resolve, sorry, we're seeing 652, pretty reasonable proc. You can actually get a lot of healing. Obviously I'm cleaving like 5 golems at a time. So maybe more in that WoWo environment, more in that open world, blobs of enemies, you're going to have a lot of opportunity to get a lot of potential healing here. Or if all your enemies stack up in PvP, maybe you can also do that. Probably a little bit harder to get as many multi-hits, but still a lot of healing potential from the Resolve virtue. Then moving into Courage, we have Crashing Courage. And the proc here is actually, again, a pretty powerful effect. The 5-hit trigger here is going to be both Aegis and Stability. So this is really enabling that kind of dive potential for the character. You're just going to, if you dive in with Courage, you're going to be able to, I didn't attack anything, probably a mistake. I recommend attacking things after you activate your virtues. So that's going to give you the extra, up to 12 stacks of Stability. That's insane. But again, hitting multiple targets here, that's per five strikes, you're going to get Aegis, you're going to get Stability. So really powerful cooldown to kind of give you a little bit more staying power in the fight. But one thing to keep in mind is that these stances, I'll just keep calling them stances, why not? These virtue stances all overwrite each other. So if you do if you fire off Justice and fire into Resolve immediately, you see that I now only have Resolve active. So this is going to create a little bit of decision making in terms of if you want to maximize your mobility or you want to maximize your virtue triggers. Because if you're looking to maximize virtue triggers, maybe your enemy is able to disengage after you dive in with Justice, they shadow step away and you actually need to chase them, so you can't really get full value out of your Justice, and you might need to continually chase after them, and then you're losing access to either Justice or Courage or Resolve. But on the upside, you have a lot of chase potential. You just go pretty far. Throw in some movement from skill 5 on the sword. We'll talk about that real soon. So a lot of movement. There's even more movement on the utility skills that we will get to in a few moments here. So that's pretty much how the summary of the virtues. Pretty different from standard Guardian virtues, but I think it creates a really interesting kind of play style of really pushing that melee brawler character. All right, moving into the sword kit. So we have offhand sword, 2 skills here. I'm going to start out with Advancing Strike. This is the one I kind of showed off, movement skill. So it's just a dash if you don't have anything targeted. If you have something targeted, if you end up within a certain amount of range at the end of this dash, you are then going to do a final shadow step and attack. So a little bit of that rush, warrior greatsword rush, but a little bit more controlled with the shadow step. And then a nice slow and a very short immobilized 1 second. It's not intended to be like this major lockdown. We're going to see more of that coming out from the utility skills. We're going to see more of that on the elite skill, or there's more expectation that this character is going to be set up by their allies and as the assassin dive in and really secure the kill. So Advancing Strike, not going to be enough to fully confirm Executioner's Calling here, but if you can get a larger lockdown from either your allies or some of the utility side skills, you can land that. So taking a quick look at Executioner's Calling here, this is the main damage payoff of the sword offhand. Pretty big damage multiplier. We've got some vulnerability in there. Pretty straightforward skill. This is the multi-hit. You do the initial stab animation into the double swing. So you swing your sword and then you swing your swords again, and you get a solid amount of damage coming out from this skill. Yeah, so I mean that's all there's to the sword kit. 2 skills, but it's going to really lean into that mobility, damage, assassin-y type playstyle. And we're going to see a little bit more from the utility side of things, where you can kind of push a little bit more toward crowd control if you really want to, or push more on the mobility side if you want to, or just kind of push for damage if you want to. So moving on to the heal skill, Reversal of Fortune. Guild Wars 1 players probably recognize the name. Kind of an homage to that skill. We have a fairly similar mechanic. If not, it's not exactly the same. The games are very different. We're not going to see exact one-to-one copies there. But what we're going to see with Reversal of Fortune is it kind of has this similar full counter type mechanic where you are doing this initial block channel. And if you fail to block anything, you'll get a little bit of a heal here. Let me stay in combat so I don't randomly heal myself. But you're going to see, if you don't block anything, you get a very small heal, not very rewarding. That's totally by design, because the upside of this skill is if you actually block an attack, let's just have my golem friend use some fire grab or something. See a bigger payoff there. That's about a 4K heal, so about double. But you're also seeing actually taking 0 damage from that ability, so fully absorbing the damage from the incoming attack and getting a heal on top of that. Really, really high upside for this skill, because obviously if you're going to block something like Maul or Kill Shot or these heavy damaging attacks, you're effectively gaining tens of thousands of health in combination with the 4,264 of this skill. So pretty high upside, and it's definitely going to be kind of a key gameplay moment playing against this character, because you're going to want to make sure you don't trigger that reversal of fortune and really limit their options and reduce their healing. All right, let's move into some of the utility skills. We have the physical skill type, which is something we've seen in the past on Core Warrior. We've seen it on Daredevil. We're going to see a lot of the same themes, a lot of crowd control, mobility, damage, a lot of the same themes on the Willbender, but kind of doing their own flavor of physical skills. Start off with Flash Combo, pretty powerful skill here. This is going to be using that kind of fist flurry mechanic that we saw on the Daredevil, where hitting all of these rapid strikes is going to unlock a secondary skill. In this case, it is a Shadow Return. So this is a super powerful cooldown, because if you jump in, land all these abilities, you then have a 6-second window to then fire off the rest of your kit. Just press all your buttons, why not? And then you can have that opportunity to then disengage and get out all in one skill, very strong. And at the same time, then we have the counterplay side of it, where if the Guardian hops in with Flash Combo, as long as you mitigate one of those, a single attack, then they're not going to be able to hop back out. So we see this golem has Aegis. I'm a terrible player, so I used my skill on a target with Aegis. Don't get my flip over repose, and now I'm just going to get destroyed by all these golems. Moving on, we move into Whirling Light. So this is basically, this is just a damage skill. This is a pretty solid damage skill. A little bit of weakness in there, but primarily we're looking at power damage, we're looking at burning. This is a super cool whirlwind kick animation, AoE, multiple strikes. So this also really plays well into the virtues which want those multi-hits. They want you to cleave multiple targets. We're seeing Whirling Light is a great opportunity to do both of those things while also doing a good amount of damage. And as a side effect of this, a kind of bonus effect of this skill, is that it's also a little bit of a movement skill, but you're primarily going to want to use it when you're already in melee range, because you're already starting these whirlwind kicks at the start of the ability. So using it to engage, you're losing access to the maximum damage potential of this skill. And if any of these golems ran away from me, you would see that there's a little bit of a chase movement component to this ability. As you like, when I use it far away, I move toward my target as long as I'm not already in range. So a little bit of chase down, but primarily a melee range AoE big damage ability. Next up, we have Heel Crack. This one's pretty straightforward. Damage and stun, 0.01 in PvP and World v World. Look forward to that. This one, this is kind of your combo off of Advancing Strike, because you get the 1 second immobilize here. That can guarantee Heel Crack. And then that can set up Executioner's, the full extent of Executioner's Calling there. So potentially, if you can find room for this skill on your bar, that gives you more personal opportunity to set up yourself instead of relying on allies and really unload all of your damage into a single target. And final thing, we might as well give this character a stun break. Glassy assassin characters probably want to break stuns every once in a while. So I'll just hover this super long skill fact while I take a drink of water. All right, so Roiling Light, Stun Break, Evade. This is kind of that similar backwards roll mechanic we see in a lot of skills. Same thing. You do that flip over skill. I was going to touch on, there's also the blind, the initial blind. So get stunned, break a stun, roll away, apply blind, gives you a little bit of coverage to kind of re-engage on top, and we're just going to give you the re-engage on the same skill, Quick Retribution. This is a 3-second daze, single target though. You get a lead finisher in there, maybe there's a combo field on the ground, get a little bit extra value, but 3-second daze, this is really going to allow you to potentially shift the momentum of the fight as you're breaking a stun, evading attacks, applying a blind, applying a daze on the comeback in, and then gives you another window of opportunity to really push forward with all of your damage. And finally, we're going to see the elite skill, Heaven's Palm. This is another powerful crowd control skill. A lot stronger than the 2-second stun we saw on the, what was this called? Heel crack? Yeah, heel kick, heel crack, same thing. Heaven's Palm, 4-second knockdown. This is a single target, but it's also going to do a kind of an area attack around you. So this will knock down your target and push everyone else away. So this is kind of trying to isolate your primary target, really enable that kind of assassin-y gameplay where I isolate the primary target, or isolate the priority target, and then unload my damage. 4-second knockdown, super long. I think only Backbreaker, someone's going to fact check me and destroy this, but I think Backbreaker is the only one that hits 4-second duration outside of any extensions. That's probably wrong, but why not? 4-second duration, very long. It's an elite skill. We were kind of talking earlier how this character not necessarily supposed to set themselves up as much. Elite skills are typically a spot that we tend to break or bend rules a little bit more, so this really kind of pushes that more crowd control option. Maybe you build a little bit tankier, you build, take heel crack, take Heaven's Palm, a little bit more of that disruptive brawler instead of the full glass cannon, the assassin. But Heaven's Palm, pretty strong cooldown in the elite slot. Then we're going to hop into the traits and talk about traits, because everyone loves traits. All right, so starting out with the minor traits. Righteous Sprint, mobility, super fast, Guardian build. This makes sense. Let's get movement speed. Let's get some swiftness. Makes a lot of sense, fits the character thematically. We see this a lot on the master tier minor trait of elite specializations, where it is really just reinforcing kind of the character identity. Then moving in, some of you probably noticed I was getting stacks of a buff as we were firing off these virtues. That was lethal tempo. So this is the Grandmaster Minor damage bonus trait. And this is something kind of new and cool that we're doing on a handful of buffs with this set of elite specializations, where it's going to actually refresh the duration of itself every time you apply it. So that's a little bit different from the mechanics we see with like boons, where each stack of might is going to fall off independently as those durations expire. Lethal tempo, I get a stack of this, and then there's 1 second left on that stack, but I get a second stack. Now I have 2 stacks, both at full duration. And it's really trying to push kind of this natural build-up, this kind of building momentum aspect of this character, where initially you don't quite have your maximum potential, but assuming you stay in target, you stick to your targets, you do what this character is trying to do, you're going to build up lethal tempo and maintain lethal tempo and keep that damage bonus going. And it's pretty rewarding here. 3% per stack for 5 stacks, 15%, really good. We'll see a little bit of a bonus there in the Grandmaster slot once we get there. So pretty strong damage trait. Moving into the adept traits, we're going to see a pretty similar theme across these traits, where they're all doing this more natural trade-off within the trait itself. We're maybe giving above rate for the value of this slot than we usually do, but at the same time you're going to be giving something up. So looking here at Boon Pact, increased concentration, 240 concentration in the adept slot, pretty impressive, but at the same time allies will get reduced boons from you. So this is again pushing that really selfish, assassin-y playstyle for this character. If I want to extend my Fury durations from Monk's Focus, if I want more Resolution duration to keep up my crit chance from Righteous Instinct, maybe you go into Boon Pact. Probably not, because the next trait we're going to talk about is more just straight up power focused, but it's definitely an option if you're looking to just have a little bit more boon duration. Going to power for power, here you go. 240 power minus 240 toughness. So pretty big trade-off there for a pretty big gain. This is pushing Guardian down pretty close into that light armor range. So bottom health, bottom armor-ish. It's feeling a little bit more like an elementalist, so you can enjoy going into the down state and pressing all your abilities there, as Ellie mains are all used to. But again, as long as you're playing well, dodging your abilities, just dodge. 240 power in the adept slot, pretty powerful trait. And finally, we have Conceited Curate here in the bottom trait line. Gives a little bit of healing power at the trade-off of not healing allies. This character doesn't really want to heal allies anyway, so it's just a bit more upside. 240 healing power, maybe not all that much. This could definitely be higher. We're definitely going to be, watching the data from the beta, watching all the feedback from the beta, seeing what's overtuned, what's undertuned. This is definitely something that could come up. Needs a little bit more of that selfish sustain if that's the option you want to go to. This is the trait for you. So then let's move on to the master tier. I could just switch it up and go grandmaster traits and throw everybody off, but that doesn't really make sense.
Told them your plan now, so.
So the first trait we're going to see in the master tier slot, restorative virtues. This is actually a really interesting trait, and it's really trying to push the mobility aspect of this character. Basically, what it says, while a virtue is active, activating another virtue reduces the initial virtue's cooldown time by its remaining duration. That's a lot of words, but what does it actually mean? So basically what it means is if you're just kind of rapid firing your virtues, you're going to get refunded for the amount of time that you did not spend in that virtue stance, whatever you want to call it. So if I pop off Justice here, 6 seconds of Justice, but I immediately pop Resolve, you see a big cooldown refund on Justice there. And similarly, if we pop into Courage early, we're going to be getting some refund on Resolve. And so that is really going to really enable that kind of mobility playstyle if that's something you're looking for, because you will be getting lower and lower cooldowns. We'll also see a little bit more of that in the Grandmaster slot for cooldown reduction. Moving on, Holy Reckoning. So this augments Willbender Flames, 33% damage increase. That's a really large number, but as I touched on earlier, Willbender Flames are not really something that we're intending to be kind of this main damage source anyway. So you're looking at 33% on top of a pretty small power coefficient already. It's not going to be doing a whole lot of value there. The main upside here is the healing per target struck. So you're going to look at this trait, and maybe in combination with Resolve. If you're hitting a lot of targets, we're going to see a lot of potential healing. I mean, the Courage AoE is probably the most easy to hit the most targets with, the big circle, but Resolve is also going to be giving you those Resolve procs at the same time. Obviously, all three of the virtues create Willbender Flames, which all heal you, so a bit more of sustain. This is going to be great in those larger fights where you're hitting multiple targets with these Willbender Flames. A lot of potential healing coming in from that trait. And finally, we're going to look at Vanguard Tactics. So this is a pretty powerful trait again. All these traits seem pretty strong, except for, Conceited Curate. We'll throw that one at the bus. It's a little bit on the weaker side, but a lot of good traits here in the Willbender kit. And Vanguard Tactics is kind of this two-pronged, multifaceted thing where up front it's going to just augment Courage, and Courage is going to give you protection and resolution on top of what it already does. We have a similar trait over in Virtues that gives protection on Courage, so those are going to add together. We're going to get a lot of potential protection duration if you take both of those together. But the kind of secondary component of this skill, or this trait rather, is that it gives you resistance on any shadow step. So we're looking at skills like Judge's Intervention, Symbol Blades. Guardian has a lot of shadow steps. We have even more shadow steps on the Willbender kit as well. So potentially a lot of resistance uptime. And this one is actually a trait that came to the party pretty late. This is more after the change we made to the resistance boon in the recent balance update, where previously resistance was, full condition immunity, and that's way too powerful an effect to put on such a repeatable source like on Shadow Step. But with the move to non-damaging conditions only, it's something that really fits this more assassin-y melee character playstyle, because you're going to be mitigating, ignoring cripple, immob, weakness, blind, like all these things that shut down melee characters so well. You're going to have access to resistance on your engage, assuming you blink in with either Courage or JI or any number of these shadow steps. And okay, you can just chain them together, get more and more resistance. A lot of opportunity to really unload all of your damage while ignoring those non-damaging conditions. And almost done, so close. Only 3 more traits to go, and we're done with all the specs. So we'll get to them in a short minute here. All right, so common theme amongst Grandmaster traits or the Willbender is that they're all going to augment one of the virtues in their particular way. They're all pretty different, but they are all pretty powerful. Let's just throw out that word again, why not? Call everything powerful, and then when it's not powerful, you guys can all give me flack for it on forums or wherever you feel like doing that. Starting with Phoenix Protocol, this is going to be your resolve, augmenting resolve. So instead of the upfront heal on that passive trigger, you're instead going to get a little bit of regeneration, so heal over time, a little bit less valuable to this Glacier character. You'd rather have the upfront heal, but instead we're giving you regen and also then giving you alacrity on top of that. So this is what leans more into that cooldown reduction type of gameplay, where we're going to see resolve now giving me alacrity. You can build up a lot of alacrity, again cleaving out a ton of targets here with a lot of multi-hit skills. You can get access to a lot of alacrity, so that's going to reduce your virtue cooldowns, going to reduce your damage cooldowns, going to reduce your crowd control cooldowns. It's going to enable you to kind of press more buttons, which I love pressing buttons, and I imagine a lot of players like pressing buttons too. So alacrity, really valuable component given in exchange for trading that upfront heal for that slower over time regeneration. And the bonus note there is that resolve duration actually goes up a little bit as well. So increasing the duration and just giving you more and more resolve triggers. Next up we have Tyrant's Momentum. This is going to be the Justice Augment, 2-second duration increase. This also modifies Lethal Tempo, which we talked about a little bit earlier. So this, instead of 3% per stack, we're now looking at 5% per stack, but also a shorter duration. So this actually reduces Lethal Tempo from 6 seconds to 4. It's really going to require you to stick to those targets, keep hitting them, keep proccing your Justice, keep proccing your Resolve, keep proccing all your virtues, activating your virtues to make sure that Lethal Tempo keeps refreshing itself, keeps stacking up, really maximize your damage. And it also gives a little bit more opportunity for players to disengage or land a long CC to force the Guardian, force the Willbender out of that Lethal Tempo, lose all their stacks, and kind of give you that reprieve and a little bit of breathing room. And finally, we have Deathless Courage. We saved the craziest for last. I mean, it's not crazy, but it's a little bit crazy. Carl told me about this trait when he was building it, and I'm like, Carl, that's crazy. But you know, we talked about it, and it's definitely an interesting trait. It's something we want to see how it plays. So I'll just hover this tooltip for a second while I snag some water, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. All right, so Deathless Courage. This augments your courage virtue. And it says, as long as courage is active, you cannot die. Your health cannot go below 1 HP. That is a pretty powerful effect. It does reduce the duration of courage here, so we're seeing the 4-second courage duration instead of the baseline 6. There's a little bit of a extending kind of momentum building opportunity here as well. For every player kill you get a couple of extra seconds there, up to 4 seconds duration, so you can get up to 8 seconds of this kind of no death mechanic if you are kind of chaining kills together. Otherwise it's going to be a 4 seconds, can't die. But this doesn't have the same kind of bailout heal that we see on like AED, which has the same mechanic. I can't die when I have AED, and it's going to heal me for a lot if I would die. Instead, this is just going to keep me at 1 HP, and I better get out of range before when courage ends, or I'm just going to fall over because someone's going to touch me and I'm going to take 1 damage and go into the downstate. So, I mean, this is something you're going to want to, this is something that's going to enable you to really dive in and, again, push all your buttons and then have an opportunity to get out. We saw a similar gameplay with Flash Combo into Repose. We see a little bit more of that on Crashing Courage, that no death mechanic giving you that window of time to get your big damage abilities off and then get out or get sustained back up by your teammates to avoid just falling over when that ends. All right, so we made it through. That's a lot of skills, a lot of traits, a lot of tooltips. And that's all we have here for the Willbender.